This video was chosen for production by my subscribers on Patreon. If you'd like to help pick the next one, the link is in the description.
Hello everyone. Today's video is one that I've been excited to make for a while. Although this isn't technically part of my Railway series research, it's probably the first Sodorian research subject I ever looked deeply into. I still have the draft 30-page research booklet I made all the way back in 2014 saved on an old laptop. I never got around to finishing it though, so I feel that this video today marks the culmination of my Culdee Fell research. With this video, we'll first take a look at how the Culdee Fell Railway came to be written into the series, and then meet the locomotives and rolling stock of the line. Then we'll take a look at the history of the line, the route the line takes, and the operations of the railway. Finally, we'll discuss the possible future of the line, past where the law set down in the books and lectures takes us. So, first of all, let's have a quick think about why the line was written into the Railway series in the first place. After all, at the time the first map was published in 1958, the line was not present. As Christopher Awdry states in Sodor, Reading Between the Lines, this too may have been a request book, along with Wilbur Awdry's books Four Little Engines for the Talyllyn Railway and Stepney the Bluebell Engine for the Bluebell Railway, and later on Thompson the Great Railway Show by Christopher himself for the National Railway Museum, and Wilbert the Forest Engine for the Dean Forest Railway. It is based on the Snowdon Mountain Railway in North Wales. I have never quite felt at home with this one. It is out of the normal pattern, but one cannot deny the stories read well. It may be worth making the point that though incidents at Snowdon may perhaps seem over-frequent, one of the reasons why the book has never had a successor is largely because, since the line is unique in Britain, there are in fact very few authentic incidents on which stories can be based. In 1963, Wilbert Awdry visited the Snowdon Mountain Railway with his friend Teddy Boston and published an article in his Remarkables Railway section of the Church of England newspaper, suggesting he was impressed with the little engines of the mountain and so was drawn to write mountain engines. Whether it was a request book or not, the Sodor Mountain Railway director at the time, A.O.E. Davies, suggested to Wilbur Awdry that the island of Sodor may have a similar wreck railway. The island had been mapped since 1950 and Culdee Fell was identified as being the best place to have such a railway, standing at 2,046 feet above sea level. However, this figure isn't very high at all, and may well have been something to be revised at a later point. The surprise packet does give a vague figure of 3,000 feet or more. Nevertheless, Awdry used the Snowdon Mountain Railway as the in-universe inspiration for his own mountain railway, in a similar way to the Talyllyn Railway predating his Skarloey Railway. The Sodorian equivalent of those real railways would have a similar history, purpose, design, geography, rolling stock and overall character, with remarkable similar key figures to real life. In fact, the Culdee Fell would not have been built if it were not for the Snowdon Mountain Railway coming first and giving help and advice to the line on Sodor. Now, let's go to the sheds and workshop at Kirk Matcham at the base of the mountain to meet the rolling stock of the line. Christopher Awdry states in Sodor, Reading Between the Lines, that though the Culdee Fell Railway has close affinities with the Snowdon Mountain Railway in North Wales, I do not believe that my father intended any of the engines listed to be specifically associated with any of the Snowdon Mountain Railway locomotives. This may be true in terms of the character of the engines, but the names of the Snowdon and Culdee engines do seem to be related most of the time. I'll go through all 8 of their steam locomotives with all that we know about them, and point out any points of similarity to their Snowdon counterparts. All 8 engines were built at Winterthur in Switzerland, the first 5 arriving in time for the opening of the line in 1900, while the other 3 arrived in 1962. Number 1 is Godred. A few weeks after the opening day, Godred derailed, possibly when a stone lodged in the rack. He was damaged badly and never replaced. His parts were used to repair the other engines. He was named after King Godred, which Culdee suggests made him conceited. His Snowdon counterpart was Ladas, and both engines took an unfortunate tumble down the side of the mountain soon after the lines opened. Unlike Ladas, who was scrapped outright, Godred was recovered and returned to the engine sheds, with any usable parts being used to fix the other engines. Number 2, Ernest. His Welsh counterpart is Enid, the names being slightly similar, particularly if Wilbert thought it was pronounced like the English version, Enid. Number 3, Wilfred. His Welsh counterpart is Wyddfa, which sounds quite close to Wilfred. Number 4 is Culdee. He was the engine used to test automatic brakes on the line, and is our introduction to the stories via the Skarloey engines. He was sent for overhaul in Switzerland in March 1962 and returned during May 1963. Like the Snowdon number 4, named Snowdon, he is named after the mountain he climbs. He is said to be friendly with Ernest and Wilfred. Number 5, Shane Doyney. Sent for an overhaul in Switzerland in May 1962, he was the last engine to make the long, expensive trip there. He likely returned in July 1964. As such, he was the only one of the original 5 engines not to be seen in the book. His Snowdon counterpart would be Morel Chabot, with the 2 word names being similar, both referencing local peaks. So, the 5 original engines were swiftly reduced to 4, and they ran the line very well for 60 odd years, being carefully maintained and occasionally returning to Switzerland for major servicing on rotation. The arrival of 3 superheated engines in 1962 brings the total roster of engines to 7. Sodor reading between the lines suggests that Ernest and Wilfred are superseded by 2 of these new engines. However, this information seems to be incorrect, as it also says they do not appear in the stories, which they do, and there is no suggestion this is the case in the Island of Sodor book or the lectures. I think this may simply be a mistake by Christopher, and the 7 steam engines still run the line together. On the Snowdon Railway, the first batch of locomotives, numbers 1 to 3, had slightly shorter domes to engines 4 and 5. The newer 2 domes were also fitted with round haycock covers, but these were later removed from both. Culdee is shown with this type of dome in 1900, but loses it thereafter. Godred, the only other engine we see in 1900, does not have the dome cover. However, it does seem that he and Wilfred both have the taller dome, suggesting the 5 Culdee Fell engines all got the most up-to-date design. The initial 5 engines would have cost around £1,545 each in 1900, the later 3 around £7,700. So on to the superheated engines. Number 6 is Lord Harry. He and the other 2 were ordered in 1960 or 1961, and he arrived in March 1962, and is built to a more modern superheated design than the 5 earlier engines. He is named after Lord Harry Boraine, the chairman of the line, but then loses his privilege after bad behaviour leads to him derailing, and he is reduced to just his number and working on service duty only. After gallant work saving an injured climber called Patrick, he is honoured by gaining this name for himself. The Snowdon number 6 had 2 similar names. Firstly, Sir Harmoud, after the chairman, which is a similar story with Lord Harry being named after the chairman of his line, and later being renamed Padarn, which is similar to Patrick. After initially being described as a terror by Ernest and Wilfred, and reckless by Culdee, and he frightens a coach called Catherine when he takes risks while out with her, he becomes a much better behaved and much better liked engine. Number 7 is Alaric, ordered at the same time as Lord Harry, and arrives in May 1962. His Snowdon counterpart would be Ralph, but at the time of publishing this engine was called Aylwin, which sounds closer to Alaric. And finally number 8 is Eric, who was also ordered at the same time, and arrived sometime in the summer of 1962. His Snowdon counterpart would be Eirari, which is similar to Eric. Alaric and Eric were 2 legendary kings of Sweden, possibly brothers, and their names may have come to Sodor as part of the Viking invasion. The Island of Sodor lists Eric's arrival as August 1962. Reading between the lines gives June, but the Island of Sodor also states that the 3 new engines arrived at 2 months intervals. Lord Harry in March, Alaric in May, which means Eric would have arrived in July. Whichever month is correct, he certainly arrived in the summer of 1962. Ernest and Wilfred describe Alaric and Eric as nice, quiet engines. There is a small difference between number 6 on the Snowdon and number 7 and 8, in that 7 and 8 have slightly deeper water tanks. All these 3 engines predate their Sodor counterparts, so it seems likely that they would all have the larger tanks. The illustrations seem to show number 6 has shorter tanks than number 7 though. All the engines wear a deep purple livery with orange lining. This livery was worn at opening and also in 1963 during the stories of mountain engines. It's possible that the livery didn't change the whole time, or it could be the case that the livery changed during that time but reverted back to the original by the time the new engines arrived. On the Snowdon Mountain Railway, the initial livery was believed to be dark red, although through the years dark green, mid-green, pea green, scarlet red, blue and black have all been seen on the line, with a variety of linings. The superheated engines have black boilers beyond the end of their tanks. The line also has several coaches and a permanent way train. There have been some former coaches and open wagons on the line which have since been scrapped. At the opening there were 6 coaches on the line. 5 had roofs and open sides, with protection provided by weatherproof curtains. The other was fully open with no roof. This was unpopular and quickly withdrawn, as the conditions travelling up the mountain could be severe, and the lack of protection made the ascent unpleasant for the passengers. Although the railway was tested with 2 coach trains, only 1 carriage was permitted when the line was opened. The 5 coaches with curtains fared better than the open coaches, and some survived until the 1920s when they were phased out. The passenger stock developed on the line with the introduction of the saloons which replaced the open-sided coaches. There were 9 in total, and these were generally assigned to a particular engine. The only one introduced in the stories is Catherine, the coach that runs with Culdee, who was scared by Lord Harry's recklessness. These saloons have 56 seats and are perhaps a little less comfy than coaches on other lines, but are far more luxurious than the original coaching stock. They have a guard's compartment at the front to keep a lookout on the way up, and with an emergency brake on the way down which can stop a coach within a few feet. While the line did try 2 coach trains, for safety reasons 1 coach is now the rule. On the Snowdon, some of the open coaches were rebuilt into the closed saloons, but it is not clear if the same happened on the Culdee Fell, or if the older coaches were all scrapped and replaced. We certainly hear the fate of 2 of their frames, which I'll get onto in a moment. They wear a livery of cream and orange. Like with the locomotive liveries, this appears to be the same at the time of opening and the stories of mountain engines. On the Snowdon Mountain Railway, the livery of red and cream only appears in the 1960s. Before that, a variety of colours were seen. The design of the coaches varies slightly, and Catherine bears closest resemblance to one of the 1924 coaches on the Snowdon. However, the coaches' histories are not well documented, so it's difficult to say which one. As to the coach Lord Harry takes, it looks more like one of the Snowdon Railway's rebuilt originals. Other early rolling stock on the line was a small number of open trucks used to carry produce down from the scattered farms near the base of the mountain. These did not last long, as the Culdee Fell Railway had to charge higher fees due to the nature of the line, and with local road improvements the goods business was not used enough and withdrawn, and the goods trucks were disposed at this time. The only non-passenger stock on the line is known as the truck, or the trucks in the Island of Sodor book. These vehicles are used daily, and also help with accidents, emergencies and rescues. They were called to action when Lord Harry came off the rails during the events of mountain engines, for example. Due to their importance, they have their own road in the shed. Their daily role is to take the first train of the day, carrying 400 gallons of water, 1 ton of coal, stationmen and staff to the Summit restaurant, along with whatever stores they need, and are brought back down the same way in the evening. The truck is referred to as she in the stories, but there are 2 different wagons. The first is a small passenger area with a guard's compartment and a water tank attached. The second is a flat truck with room for loads to be pegged down. It seems like the passenger compartment is a female vehicle, while the flat truck may be too. They were constructed on the frames of 2 of the old open coaches. The compartment is dark brown with the tank and flat wagon being light grey in colour. The Snowdon Mountain Railway also has vehicles like this, which have worn a variety of liveries over the years. So now we've met the engines and coaches who will take us on this great adventure, let's find out about the history of the line. In 1880, the Mid-Sodor Railway opened. This line ran from the harbour at Alsborough to the edge of Peel Godred, and from the start catered to holiday makers and were instrumental in developing tourism on the island, particularly in the Peel Godred district. By the 1890s, they had the idea to build a mountain railway up the largest mountain on the island, Culdee Fell, and hoping to extend their line to reach Kirk Matcham, where passengers could change trains. This extension to the Mid-Sodor Railway was never built, and they found opposition from a local landowner, Lord Peter Braine, who did not want the mountain railway spoiling his view of the mountain. As such, the development of a mountain railway was halted. In the meantime, the Skarloey Railway Company made the most of the opportunity to increase tourism for their line by advertising Culdee Fell excursions. As the Skarloey station was the closest to the mountain at the time, they provided wagonettes to take visitors to the place where the ancient path up the mountain crossed the moorland road, near where the current Skarloey Road station lies, and the ascent to the peak from there was a pleasant one. These excursions proved very popular, and so the people of Kirk Matcham and Peel Godred saw their tourist numbers dwindle. They took their grievances to Lord Peter, who they persuaded to agree to the mountain railway. In 1896, the Culdee Fell Tram Road and Hotel Company Limited was formed, with Lord Peter as chairman. In this capacity, he made sure the lower part of the line skirted around the edge of his property, rather than cutting through it as was originally planned. Assistance in construction and practice was given by the Snowdon Mountain Railway, which opened in April 1896, and in the February of 1897, the first sod was cut at Kirk Matcham by Lady Elaine, the eldest daughter of Lord Peter. Construction went smoothly, and in March 1900 the line was passed for passenger traffic by the Board of Trade. The line officially opened on Whit Monday, which fell on the 4th of June 1990, and all proceeded well for a little over a month, when Godred, the number 1 locomotive, derailed on a return journey at Devil's Back and fell down the mountain. The engine was never replaced, and the parts which were recovered were used to keep the other 4 engines in working order. It is believed a stone got lodged in the rack rail, but this has not been proved. The line reopened after stringent measures were taken to ensure this would not happen again, and since that day of reopening, the 8th of April 1901, there have not been any other accidents like this, although there have been some minor mishaps. The Mid-Sodor Railway proposed extending the line again to Kirkmatcham, but as the tourist traffic there would only be viable for half the year, the project was dropped. The North Western Railway built their Peel Godred branch in around 1923, and so the exchange siding would have been laid after this. It's possible that the first viaduct predated the branch, or it may have been added afterwards to allow the standard gauge line to pass beneath. From 1945, the summer circular tours have included the Culdee Fell Railway, where Sodor roadways buses connect to the Skarloey and North Western Railways, and now, since the 1960s or 1970s, to the Arlesdale Railway too. Until the 1960s, the engines were sent back to Switzerland for repair. However, by this time it became apparent that 2 engines would need heavy overhaul, and so 3 new engines were ordered. The designs of these engines dated from the 1920s, but were apparently deemed to be what the railway needed. Culdee was sent away in March 1962, when Lord Harry arrived, and after Alaric and Eric arrived in May and August respectively, Shane Dorney was sent for repair in September of that year. Culdee arrived back in May 1963. During this year, Lord Harry derailed and had his name taken off him, then was involved with the rescue of a climber and got the name Patrick as a reward. These events are told in the book Mountain Engines, which would be this railway's only appearance in the railway series. At this time, Lord Harry Boraine was the chairman, likely the son or grandson of Lord Peter. The general manager is called Walter Richards. Both these men were still in their positions in 1987, when the Island of Sodor book was published. Shane Dorney was the last engine to make the journey to Switzerland, as Kirkmatcham is now equipped to carry out all but the heaviest of overhauls, which are carried out at Croghansgate Works. The line would be mentioned in passing in other books in the series, and is referenced in annuals, maps, the surprise packet, and the books with lore from the series. Now, let's take a look at the route the line takes up the mountain and all the features we pass on the way. We start at Kirkmatcham, the headquarters of the railway. The very end of the line is Kirkmatcham Station. The eastern platform is rented by the North Western Railway for its Peel Godred branch line trains. The platforms form a square-bottomed U-shape, and the mountain railway uses the inside faces of the platforms for their trains, departing from the western one and arrivals from the east. Between these is a relief road for an extra train to stand in case of a lot of passengers. The booking office, waiting room and refreshment rooms occupy the base of the U. There is a ground frame on the up platform that controls the key points. In the far distance, the hills around Ulfstead can be seen here. Leaving the platform, the sidings connect to the main line, which is just north of the station, and passing beneath a gantry, from there the points lead straight on, which continues up the mountain, or swings to the east for access to the loco and coach facilities. Closest to the main line are the carriage sheds, which have 2 roads, one for the 9 passenger coaches and the other for the trucks. Next to that is the engine shed, which has 3 roads and has been expanded from the original 2-road shed to accommodate the 3 new engines that arrived in the 1960s. Besides that, there is the workshop with a lathe and a store, where the stock of the line is maintained. In the yard there are water and coal facilities. Looking from inside the sheds out towards the station and beyond, the mountain called Shane Dorney can be seen. Looking northwards, over the top of the shed, the mountains past Peel Godred surrounding Dubbin Moor can be seen. On Wilbert's map from 1963, the carriage shed is only shown to have 1 road, and the northwestern branch line is not shown, and nor is its platform. Beyond the shed, the exchange siding with the North Western Railway can be found. For light goods and parcels this is done at the platform, but for heavy machinery such as engines, there is a siding on the branch line for this purpose. Now going back to the main line, the line passes to the west side of the sheds, and then the line curves towards the east and crosses the Peel Godred branch by way of a viaduct over the top, as the standard gauge line heads on towards Peel Godred. The Howinab can be seen to the north, as well as the town of Peel Godred, and to the south the Culdee flows. We'll be following this little stream quite closely as we go up the mountain. This area is known as Shiloh, and is little more than a scattering of lonely farms, where the sheep outnumber the people by 100 to 1, surrounding a little chapel. In the early days of the line, there were sidings here with wagons to move farmers' goods. However, the price for freight working on a mountain railway was high, and after the Island Council improved the roads, the traffic declined, and so the sidings were lifted and the wagons disposed of. The station here is small, with a passing loop and a water tank fed by the Culdee. Just as a quick aside, I think this image shows Shiloh probably before the line was open to the public. It has to be below the tree line and have 2 lines next to each other, and the only places we see both of those factors are at Kirkmatcham and Shiloh. There isn't a place at Kirk Matcham where there are two lines parallel like this in the image without there being railway infrastructure around, which makes me think this is Shiloh. Leaving Shiloh Station, the line continues to climb and a great waterfall can be seen to the south. It is called Bain Foss, where the water drops over 60 feet from a narrow channel to many rocky basins which churn the water white. The line passes Polney Trink, a large pool on a hillside, and curves around to the south to follow its edge. This area is now part of a wildlife sanctuary, donated by Lord Harry Boraine. 20 minutes after leaving Shiloh we reach the halfway viaduct. This 10-arched viaduct spans the wooded ridge from which the road to Skarloey was cut, which it passes over. The next station is found just after this viaduct and is appropriately named Skarloey Road. This is the midway section on the line and is the last point on the ascent with road access, where passengers can join from a Sodor Roadways coach. As such, there is a booking office here, as well as a refreshment room, and the station has a passing loop and water facilities with a 10,000-gallon water tank fed by the Culembeck. The footpath, which often follows the course of the railway, divides here. It can either take ramblers to the summit or to St Matcham's Cave. At this point the tree line is passed, and so the scenery opens up. At this level there is just grass and some scrub, but still plenty of sheep graze here. Leaving Skarloey Road, the scenery gets bleaker, with a small amount of vegetation almost entirely disappearing and being reduced to small, hardy patches. The footpath leaves the line for some time, crossing the Culembeck and dividing some way away from the line. The path to the summit rejoins the line at the next station, while the path to St Matcham's Cave crosses the Culembeck again and then passes over the railway line and follows the curve of the mountain north and east. Near this crossing place was the ruin of a former resting house on what is called the Pilgrim's Path. The Sodor Island Trust, who was designated that whole area a national park, rebuilt the ruin as a shop and information bureau, which is open at the same times as the railway. The next stop on our ascent is Devil's Back. The station here is set slightly below the line to allow some protection from the weather. It is often very windy here. The ridge is some 2,000 feet above the Lake Lowy Matcham below. There is a passing loop here, as well as a water pipe. The Island of Sodor book notes that Skarloey Road is the last reliable place to fill up, so it's likely that this hose is only used when it's really necessary. Just after leaving the station, the line crosses over Culembeck for the first time, and its spring can be found somewhere to the north. A little further on, the footpath crosses the line. The last mile is the steepest, climbing another 1,000 feet in this twisting and turning stretch of track. At the top is Summit Station, with two long terminal roads. There is a hotel here, although in reality it is more of a cafeteria. It is sheltered by the peak, which walkers can ascend via the path from the station. A footpath loop can be found here, which links the peak to St Matcham's Cave. There are a few differences between the Culdee Fell and Snowdon mountain lines. For instance, at Llanberis, the headquarters of the SMR, there are only 2 roads at the station rather than the 3 on Sodor. There is also not a carriage shed between the main line and the engine shed, and the standard gauge line is wholly absent. The placement of bridges and viaducts is also slightly different. It's unclear from the maps if some of the footpath and railway crossings are on the level, or if the railway is set on a bridge above the paths as on Snowdon. Now we know about the line, let's take a quick look at what little we know about the railway's operations. The line is open from Easter to Michaelmas, which is on the 29th of September, after which time Kirk Matcham Station is unstaffed, both for the Culdee Fell and the North Western Railway. This has been the case from opening in 1990 until 1987, and there is no reason to believe this has changed much. The Snowdon Mountain Railway is open for a little longer than it was back in 1963 when mountain engines came out, this year closing on November the 2nd. During the open season, it's unknown if Shiloh is staffed, but the other 2 intermediate stations are, as is the Summit along with its restaurant. 6 staff are on Kirk Matcham, 2 or 3 at Skarloey Road, 1 at Devil's Back, and more than 1 at the Summit. Each engine has its own crew and each train will have a guard. The line is a 2-foot 7.5-inch rack railway using the ABT system developed by Dr. Roman Abt, which uses teeth to make sure engines get up steep slopes. The engine's wheels are used to support the weight of the locomotive, and the lines are greased to aid movement. The coaches are not coupled to the train for safety reasons. A remarkably similar line, the Snowdon Mountain Railway, had opened in North Wales just a few years before, and as with the Talclyn and Skarloey railways, the 2 lines have a good relationship, and the Snowdon was able to help the Culdee out greatly. The only major difference is that the Snowdon Mountain Railway is 4 3/4 miles long with many sharp gradients, whereas the Culdee Fell is double that with easy gradients, other than the 1 in 5 on the last half mile to the summit. The first and last trains of the day is with the trucks. This takes 400 gallons of water, a ton of coal, the station staff, the restaurant staff, and any supplies needed for the day. The last train at night brings the workers back down the mountain. We know that during the events of mountain engines, the last train of the day reaches Devil's Back at 5:15, and they wait for the last passenger train of the day to pass the loop. The maximum speed for trains downhill is 5 miles an hour. This means the final train of the day leaves the summit to return to the bottom of the mountain at about 5 o'clock. Again, this is similar to the Snowdon Mountain Railway at the time, and is something that has not changed much in the intervening years. When the line is closed in the winter months, this time is used for maintenance and repairs. As the relief road at Kirk Matcham Station suggests, the Culdee Fell employs a policy of putting on more trains when it gets busier. Back in the 1960s, the Snowdon Mountain Railway policy was a departure every half an hour, traffic depending. A train would not run without 25 return adult fares paid. That means when the line was running to timetable, 5 out of the 7 engines could be in operation at once. With the relief road at Kirk Matcham, all engines could be in steam with their coach either taking a train or ready to go. The long platforms at Summit may be able to hold a third train too. While the weather at Kirk Matcham can be clear, it can be very unpleasant by the time the train reaches Devil's Back, and so not all trains will reach the summit and can terminate here. The exception is the first and last trains with the trucks, which must always get through. There are special trains with reduced fares on the Sunday closest to April the 30th, which is St Matcham's Day. He is the patron saint of Sodor and lived in a cave on the north face of Culdee Fell. On this day there is a special service held in the cave which in part became a chapel, to which all denominations are welcome to take part. So, that's the history of the area, how the line came to be in the stories, a study of the line itself, and a review of the engines and coaches of the Culdee Fell Railway. What you will have noticed is that very little of note happens after 1963 when the events of mountain engines occur. Some developments such as electrification of the line, a goods service, and double track running were proposed on the Snowdon Mountain Railway, but never materialised, and so are unlikely on the Culdee Fell. Let's have a look though at how the line may have developed in the following 60 odd years since mountain engines came out, perhaps taking examples from the sister railway in Wales where necessary. In reality, very little changed between the setting of mountain engines in 1963 and the publication of the Island of Sodor in 1987, which was based mostly on the lectures from the 1970s. A Russell Hornsby diesel arrived second-hand on the 27th of August 1971, with hopes to regauge it and employ it as a shunter at Llanberis. This did not work out, and the shunter was sold in 1978. The biggest post-war change to the Snowdon Mountain Railway was the introduction of new engines in 1986. This was the year before the Island of Sodor came out, but no additional law for the Culdee Fell was added. 2 diesels from Hunslet arrived, followed by 2 more in 1991 and 1992, bringing the total number of engines to 11. The design is admittedly slightly odd, but they are supposed to mimic in a way the strange design of the steam engines, such as with their visible mechanisms. They have been successful additions to the line, costing £210,000 each. Of the Snowdon steam engines, numbers 2, 3, 4 and 8 have been converted to oil firing at times, but no test has been successful and they have been converted back. Numbers 7 and 8 have been withdrawn from service, and it is not believed they will ever run again, while numbers 2 and 4 are currently out of service, and it's not certain they will be steamed again either. Although all steam engines are now over 100 years old, it should be remembered that these are highly specialised machines, but as their work is of only one kind and they are well built for it, and they only work for about half the year, it's no wonder that they continue. So, while the line nominally had 11 engines, it was not able to run all of them at once. For the Culdee Fell, it seems likely to me they would have followed the Snowdon Mountain Railway in ordering diesels. Whether they would require all 4 that the Snowdon Railway ordered is another matter. As stated when discussing the engines, I believe that Sodor reading between the lines is mistaken to say the older engines have been superseded by the new, and that all 7 are still likely operational, as they were on the Island of Sodor. As such, perhaps just 2 diesels would be required. The diesels are far cheaper to run, require less crew, require less maintenance, and can conduct more trips up the mountain in a day. At least 2 of these arriving in the 1990s to Sodor would seem sensible to me, as the Culdee Fell would have had a chance to see the effectiveness of these diesels after working out initial teething troubles on Snowdon. If these engines arrived on Sodor, based on the fact that steam engines often have similar names to the diesels, here are my suggestions for names. The Snowdon number 9 is called Ninian, after the chairman of the railway at the time, and so Bahrain would be the obvious choice here, or if we're going for a sound like, then perhaps something like Lillian or Gideon. Number 10 is called Yeti in reference to all creatures of the mountain, living and legendary. There is a Manx creature called the Bagain, although this does sound very similar to Barain. A name that rhymes would be Betty. Number 11 is called Peris, after the local Lake Llyn Peris or the local saint, St. Peris. Here, the obvious choice is Matcham, after either the saint or the lake. As for names that sound similar, something like Morris, Janice, or even Felicity would have some resonance. Number 12 is called George, after the Right Honourable George Thomas, Viscount Tontypandy, a former local politician. We don't know any MPs on Sodor apart from Sir Handel Brown, so my suggestion would be Drixon or Regaby after some nearby hoity-toity families. No names really sound like George, except for Georgina or Georgia, but maybe something like Marge is not too far away. In terms of the diesel livery, I kept it the same purple with orange that the steam engines have. After the successful diesels, further loco development on the Snowdon Mountain Railway was the railcars. These three could be run in tandem or individually. In fact, this was the only time in the railway's history when 12 engines could theoretically have been in service at once. However, these were not successful and have since been scrapped. They were numbered 21, 22 and 23 and were not named. There were more new unsuccessful locos on Snowdon in the shape of two hybrid engines, number 14 Glathlin and number 15 Moel Eilio. They were named after a local lake and peak, and so if Sodor had got versions of these, Polny Trink and Shen Ven would have been good names. However, they were also found to be unsuitable and were returned. As well as having new locomotives, the Snowdon has invested in new coaches throughout the years. As a quick recap, original coaches 1 to 6 were open-sided and one was later converted to a full open. There was also a second full open, possibly numbered 7. In 1924, the 2 open coaches were withdrawn and 4 new coaches arrived. The older coaches were numbered 1 to 5 and the newer 6 to 9. 2 of these newer coaches were withdrawn about 10 years later. The stock was modernised after World War II and all vehicles were fully glazed by 1957. The older coaches were now numbered 2, 3, 4, 5 and 8 and the newer coaches 6 and 7. The number 1 was used for the truck. I think the 9 coaches the railway had in the 1920s is where Wilbur got the idea for his 9 coaches on the Culdee Fell, but during the time of mountain engines, the Snowdon Mountain Railway only had 7 coaches, 1 for each engine if all were in service at once. After the arrival of the first 2 diesels, a new carriage was built, number 10. This had bigger windows and a more modern appearance than the older stock, but was built to be visually in keeping with their style. For the Culdee Fell, there would already be enough coaches for the 2 extra engines with their 9 coaches, but if any were withdrawn or they got more than 2 diesels, a coach like Coach 10 would be needed. A big change happened in 2012 with the Snowdon coaches. All but number 10 were withdrawn, and 4 new coaches were built for the diesel engines. These coaches look much more modern than the old coaches with larger windows and increased capacities, entering service for 2013. For the remaining steam engines, 2 new coaches were provided. On the frames of number 2, a traditional coach named Snowdon Lily was built for 2013, in the style of the original coaches but now with glazing. Another was built on the frames of coach number 5, called Snowdon Mountain Goat, which came into service 2 years later. Now these 2 sets of coaches are quite a drastic change. While I could see diesel coaches and replica coaches being popular introductions, I don't think fans would like the outright withdrawal of the antique coaches of the railway, particularly Catherine. However, there is not a great deal of room to store extra coaches, and so if new coaches were ordered, a compromise would have to be made. As well as coach development, there has also been a change in the trucks on Snowdon. The truck was rebuilt in 1964 and again in 2006 when a bogie wagon was added to the goods roster. The truck being updated and the addition of a bogie wagon both make great sense. The Snowdon has obviously changed its services with a clear distinction between the steam and diesel stock. At its locomotive height, it was possible to run 12 locomotives on the Snowdon Mountain Railway at once. As the Culdee Fell, if it ever got any diesels, would be closer to this number than the 6 currently working engines the Snowdon has, it may be able to host special diesel coaches or vintage replica trains, but more likely as specials, rather than the norm, as the Snowdon now does. With possible new engines and coaches, more drivers and guards would be needed. However, the biggest change may come from a change of management. In mountain engines, Lord Harry and Walter Richards were grown men. As a recording in 2025, these men would surely be approaching 90 years old at least. Sodor is renowned for its nepotism in railway management, Admittedly, they have all done good work so far, so it's not unlikely the children or grandchildren of these men now run the line. To store the rail cars and newer coaches, the Snowdon Railway built new sidings in the yard at Llanberis, requiring some rock to be destroyed and a bridge to be built over a river. If the Culdee Fell needed more space for newer engines or coaches, they cannot really extend east or west due to being sandwiched between Kirk Matcham Town and the Pilgodred branch. They could make the sheds deeper to hold more stock if required, or construct a siding beyond them. As the Rack Railway has reached its maximum potential in terms of length, the only other updates could be with improving the infrastructure already there. The Snowdon has improved its once dilapidated restaurant at the summit, as well as added a new station, Rocky Valley Halt. This probably opened in 1974, and is only used when the weather is too bad to reach Clogwyn, their version of Devil's Back. The station is a simple concrete platform with no shelter, passing loop or facilities. If they did purchase new diesel engines, the loco facilities at Kirk Matcham would need a fuel depot. And that's what I believe the probable future of the Culdee Fell Railway is, after exploring all the lore we've been given. I really hope you've enjoyed it. Mountain Engines is a real favourite railway series book of mine, and I even made a video with 10 reasons why it and its railway are so good. Why not give it a watch if you're interested? Link in the description as always. Even though it's unfinished, I'm going to put a PDF copy of my old Culdee Fell research paper up on Patreon if any of you are interested in seeing it.
Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the Patreon like these fine folk to help pick the next video subject, get early access to new content and help support the channel.